In this video, we're going to be talking about exercise 9-2. And again, for this one here, I've already got the object drawn up based on the dimensions that were given in the book. This is a metric file. So once I have everything drawn, I'm going to just follow the same process I've been doing for my paper space model space drawings. I'm going to switch over to my layout, and then I'm going to make a viewport, which is MV enter. I'm going to draw the viewport somewhat big because it's the only view that I'm going to have on this particular sheet. I'll click on the border, change this to the viewports layer, and then come down here and I'm going to change the scale to 1:1. I can hit escape to clear my border selection, and for this particular one I'm going to go through and I'm going to place all of the dimensions to start with. So most of these are just going to be linear dimensions, so I'm just going to go through. Let me go to my dimension layer first. So here we've got the 15, 30, 17, 34. This is our 15. The distance between these two is 25. The distance between these two is 50. The overall width is 80. From the bottom to this circle is 45. The overall height is 60. I need to do a diameter dimension for this particular one and a radius dimension for this one. And just a quick double check to make sure that I've got all the dimensions in. It looks like everything is there, so now I can begin to focus on my tolerances. So the first thing that I want to do, we'll address this little issue here in a few minutes. The first thing I want to do is I want to go back to View and open up my Properties window. And the other way that you can do that if you're on the Home tab and you don't want to switch tabs is just type PR Enter, and that will open up your Properties window. And I'm going to take this one just by going straight through the way they are, 1 through 12. And I'm going to start with Dimension 1. When I click on this, the tolerance display is going to be symmetrical, and you can see what they all are by hovering over them. So we'll go to symmetrical, and this is going to have a 0.25 dimension or tolerance applied to it. So what I want to do next is I want to go to Match Properties, select on this, and then I'm going to select on Dimension 2 and Dimension 8, because these are the ones that share the same 0.25 plus or minus 0.25 tolerance. By going through and using match properties, you can eliminate a lot of steps, especially when consistency becomes an issue. It makes it a lot faster to go through and do that method. So Dimension 3, which is going to be this one right here, is going to be a plus or minus 0.05. So we're going to click on this, go to symmetrical, 0.05 is going to be the tolerance on that one there. Now, Dimension 5 also shares that same tolerance. So we're going to go to Match Properties, select this one, and Dimension 5, and then we have that one done as well. For Dimension 4, which is this 15 right here, this one is actually using limits, and it's using limits in a way that requires 2 decimal places of precision. So when I click on this, I want to go to Tolerance Display Limits, and my upper limit in this case is 15, so it doesn't have any deviation, and my lower limit is 0.2. So here we can see that it's got the 15 and the 14.8. I want to come in here and I want to change this to no so that it displays all the decimal places for each of these 2 dimensions. That way it just looks a little bit more consistent with what is actually going on. So next is going to be dimension 5, which was the dimension that had the 0.25. No, dimension 5 has the 0.05, which is already applied. Dimension 6 is going to be plus or minus 0.1, so we're going to click on this. Tolerance display is going to be symmetrical, 0.1. For dimension number 7, which is this fillet right here. Now we're gonna spend an additional minute on this fillet right here, because the way that the software, the ISO standard, has the extension line actually come off as an extension of the arc is something that I feel is broken, because you never see this anywhere in any other type of dimension. So we're gonna focus on this thing in a couple different ways, but the first thing I want to do is I want to focus on the plus or minus 0.1. If I click on this and I come in here, I'm going to scroll down because there's other stuff that I want to change. Let me make sure that this one's no longer selected. So I can take that R5, come down here and change this to symmetrical, and change this to 0.1. Now, to get the 8 places in there, there's a couple of different places that I can do it. If I come up here to the primary units, I can put in, for the dimension suffix, I can actually go ahead and add -8, let me turn caps lock on, places. The problem with that is going to add that to both the dimension value and the tolerance value, so that's not going to work for me. So I'm going to get rid of that for now, and we'll address how to put that in a second. But the other thing that I really want to address is I want to address this little extension arc right here. To get rid of that, I need to go up to my lines and arrows. For extension line, I'm going to turn that off for this particular dimension. And what that does is that gets rid of that little extension, and it puts the arrowhead actually on the arc, which is where it's supposed to be to begin with. So now that I've got the tolerance value in for this one here, if I double click on it, it's going to open up the mText editor. I can just move my cursor to the right, put in my -8 places, and then close my text editor, and it updates my dimension. So that is dimension 7. For dimension 8, we have a plus or minus 0.25, which I've already got in there. For dimension 9, we've got a plus or minus 0.1. And we see that 0.1 back here on number 6. So I can go back to match properties, select this, and then click on this to add that 0.1 to that as well. Now, for this particular one, there is no tolerance given for the diameter of this circle, but it does have the 3 holes after it. So if I click on this, in this particular instance, I can go to my primary units and go to the dimension suffix and just add my -3 places. And then what that does is that puts it in there without having to go into any other text editor. Or actually, this one says on the drawing 3 holes. So we've got that in. We can now go to our next one, which is dimension 11. And 11 and 12 both share the same deviation. It's a 0.5 or a 0.2 deviation. And if we look down here, we have that 0.2 deviation as well. So I can go to match properties and select this one. And then I can pick on this one and this one. And because I changed the other settings to allow the trailing zeros to appear, it does it in both of these locations as well. Now, the only thing that I might want to do on this one here is take this dimension and move it up just a tiny bit so that it's spaced out a little bit more evenly. But there you can see how we apply all of the dimensions to exercise 9-2 and change this weird arc extension line into just a regular arrow that points at the surface.